Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so we are picking up with the conclusion of Batman Ghost Stories, right? This is the end of the Batman Ghost Stories story. And I am a little bit on the fence about how this ends, but I'm also excited at the same time. But overall, the story was absolutely amazing, right? And this is one of those stories that, one, I urge you guys buy, and two, I'm going to buy the physical copy of it, right? As most of you guys know, I only ever buy physical copies of comics if they're important to me. At this point in my life, after having spent so many years buying physical comics, I just got rid of my collection and I just buy digitally now, right? It's just so much easier than walking around with 20 comics at a time trying to read them. So the first thing we do here is we basically pick up with what is in essence the final flashback of the Ghost Stories story, right? In the sense that we have Batman and we have, or really Bruce Wayne and we have Ghostmaker kind of having this conversation. And the interesting thing about this is that Bruce Wayne kind of sees his training as being completed, right? He's basically done. And at this point, he's ready to head back to Gotham City and become a crime fighter. And when he's met by Ghostmaker, the response of Ghostmaker is, "You're not ready." And when he asks why, there's this really amazing conversation that goes on between the two. Now, for Ghostmaker as a character, it's very easy to chalk him up, or it could have been very easy to chalk him up as your stereotypical villain, right? A guy who just does stuff and he's essentially a vigilante and he's got no regard for human life and nothing matters or anything like that. But the reality is that while he does have a disregard for human life, his motivation for it is actually altruistic. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron. How could you believe in doing the right thing because it's the right thing and at the same time not care about people, right? But one of the things to understand is that doing the right thing does not necessarily mean the preservation of life. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. That in the world of utilitarianism, for example, doing the best or at least the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, which could mean sacrificing a few people. And that's kind of the stance of Ghostmaker, really, and to kind of put a finer point on it, that's his whole perception. When he has this conversation with Batman, he basically says you're not ready here. And when Batman asks why, he says, because the entire motivation that you exist on exists in two fronts. The first is that you're going back to Gotham City to fight crime because your mommy and your daddy got shot. And that's your entire motivation. Your motivation is external, right? You're like a person that wants to lose weight to impress a girl, right? As soon as he has that girl impressed, what's his motivation to keep losing weight anymore? At that point, his entire motivation is gone and he'll slump right back to where he was before. When you get to a point where you believe that you finally avenged the idea of your mom and your dad, then where does Gotham City go from there? Do you retire? Let it fall back into the hands of those individuals who corrupt it in the first place? How does that whole end result? The other part of that is, in order for you to succeed, you need an internal motivation. And that's where he kind of outlines the difference between himself and Bruce Wayne. That with Bruce Wayne, he wants to get basically, it's vengeance. It's the most basic principle. It's vengeance because his mom and dad got shot and he's going to get back at crime, right? He's not going to get back at an individual person, but he's going to get back at the entire principle of crime. For Ghostmaker, it's legitimately wanting to make the world better. It's truthfully wanting to actually make the world a better place. It's really just altruism at its finest. Now, where the two of them disagree is the collateral damage. That when Ghostmaker looks at Batman, he says the problem that you have here is that you basically let every small little thing get to you. In this instance, your mom and dad were shot. Now you want to get back at crime. But the entire motivation is that nobody will ever feel the same thing you felt. Well, what happens if they do? What happens if you get to a crime scene a minute later than it actually happened? What happens if you can't stop that guy from pulling the trigger and an innocent person dies? What happens? Well, then now you see yourself as a failure because you didn't live up to your motivation, right? You didn't live up to the cause that you were supposed to be pushing on. At the same time, you're basically selfish, right? I want to basically make the world a better place. We talked about that. You're just a really upset kid who wants to go back and make Gotham a better place. But the reality is, making the world better means not caring about people. And again, I know it sounds weird, but here's how he explains it, right? And it's actually a genius way. It's a really interesting way of doing it. His whole stance is, if you don't really care about people, then the ends justify the means. And if the end result is basically what amounts to more or less a utopian world where there really is no crime, because you're fighting the concept of crime on multiple levels, right? You're fighting it on the street level by putting away criminals, and then you're fighting it on the various other levels in terms of why people commit crimes. You're basically stemming it, right? So economic inequality, different things like that. You're fighting it all on multiple fronts. The idea of creating a utopian style world outweighs the number of people who died. And that's true. That is a true statement. If the end result is that the world would inherently become a utopian place, not by way way of like some kind of fascism or anything like that, but by people being able to just kind of live their lives in peace, not having to worry about crime, pursuing the things they love the most, right? Just kind of enjoying their lives essentially, then it's worth the sacrifices of all those individuals who were killed. Now, it doesn't mean that Ghostmaker is going to go through and just murder innocent people, but it does mean that he has to kind of disregard people, right? He has to look at two circumstances and say, okay, I could stop this guy here from killing that one person, or I could let them kill that one person, follow them back to their base of operations, which I don't know, and then get all the criminals at the same time. So I will sacrifice that one guy in order to apprehend those bigger guys, right? And it kind of sucks, but it's one of these things where when it comes to the world of fighting crime and trying to do better in the world, you can't have it all. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't spare the life of the innocent guy and get all the criminals at the same time. More often than not, it doesn't work that way. It'd be nice if it did, but the reality of the world we live in is you have to make choices, and sometimes these choices will be ones you don't want to make, but at the end of the day, what you're getting out of the choice you make is better than what you're losing in the choice that you're making, right? So it's one of these interesting kind of philosophies, interesting situations, but that's where him and Bruce Wayne differ, because Bruce Wayne believes that he can have it all, right? He can save the innocent guy, and he can topple the criminals, and he can kind of make the day better and make make Gotham City a much safer place. The irony of all this is that if you look at the history of Bruce Wayne, he's basically a dog chasing his tail. The criminals never really get fixed. They never really get changed. They're always bad guys, right? He really hasn't made any headway in making Gotham better. If anything, he's made Gotham worse. And so that's kind of the irony here. That's kind of the whole point that Ghostmaker was trying to teach him is you're not ready to actually do what needs to be done because you believe that you need to save everybody. When all the while, the reality is some folks you're just gonna have to let die in order to catch the bigger fish. It sucks, it's not fair, but nobody ever said the world was. And so because of that, ultimately you kind of have Bruce Wayne and Ghostmaker just disagreeing and going their separate ways, right? Insofar as Bruce Wayne basically says, fine, I'm going back to Gotham City. I don't ever want to see you there. And that's when the truce gets struck, where Ghostmaker says, okay, fine, then that's the rule. Any city that I'm currently in, you do not come to, right? If a city has been seen by me, right, in the sense that like I've been there, I've involved myself there, then you never come there. And I will never go to any city that you've touched foot in. These are our own little territories, our own little places where wherever we set up shop, nobody else gets involved. And so what we end up doing is switching up to the end of the last video when Clown Hunter intends to kill Harley Quinn. And that's kind of the funny thing here, right? That you have this discussion between these two guys, or really just kind of between Batman and Clown Hunter, where Batman tries to talk him down. The entire time this is going on, Ghostmaker is watching all this unfold. And really the point that Ghostmaker was trying to prove to Batman is if you put people in a circumstance where there's no reward for doing the right thing, but no consequence for doing the wrong thing, people will do the wrong thing. Because more often than not, the wrong thing is easier. The lazy user model and the least effort principle, right? The least effort principle was a concept created by George Ziff back in 1949, which basically said that like people want the greatest reward for the least amount of work. The lazy user model kind of builds on that work. Now, the idea of the least effort principle expands way beyond more than simply just, work and reward and stuff like that. It actually encompasses every facet of human and really just every ecosystem in the world, right? Animal life, plant life, even electricity, things like that, the path of least resistance. But it's kind of like that grocery card litmus test. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that, but the grocery card litmus test is this concept in social psychology where basically it kind of answers the question, what would people do in a situation where, again, there's no reward for doing the right thing, but no consequence for doing the wrong thing? And so if you have a grocery cart and you take it out, you bring it out to the parking lot, you put all your groceries in your car, there's no consequence. Nobody's going to arrest you or give you a ticket. Nothing bad's going to happen if you just leave that grocery cart sitting next to your vehicle and then you pull out, drive home, and that's it. But it's the right thing to do to put the grocery cart back in the carousel. Again, it's a minuscule thing, but ultimately it's designed to kind of test people and put them in a situation where you ask the question, what will they do in this? What will they do in this situation? A lot of people leave the grocery cart sitting next to their car, which is basically kind of a test of whether or not people can actually self-govern, right? Will people do the right thing, even if there's no reward for doing the right thing? And the answer to that is more often than not, no, people usually won't. That's the whole point that Ghostmaker is creating here for Batman to see. The Clown Hunter has been given the ability to kill Harley Quinn. He can take all his anger and all his revenge, all his wrath out on Harley Quinn because she was there when his parents were killed at the hands of the Joker. She's not the Joker himself, but she's the closest the Clown Hunter can get. And so in this moment when Clown Hunter is being talked to by Batman and Clown Hunter has the choice to either walk away or to kill Harley Quinn, he goes in for the kill. And had Batman not breaking himself out of his bonds, thrown his batarang at Harley Quinn, which she could in turn cut herself out and then free herself before Clown Hunter killed her. And if Batman had not been able to subdue Clown Hunter, Harley Quinn would have been killed. He would have been to his baser instinct. And the whole idea behind this here, this is what's intriguing, is the whole idea behind this is that while Clown Hunter is kind of the minority here, insofar that Harley Quinn's turned over a new leaf. Batman never really had a new leaf to turn over in the first place, but he's always taken the high road. I would surmise these two are the exception to the rule and not the rule itself. And the reason why is simple. Harley Quinn creates this case for us, where she basically starts talking to him and saying, hey, look, I was a psychiatrist. Let me talk to you for a second, right? And almost talks to him like a patient. She says, look, there's something you need to understand, right? Hear me out. And then when I'm done talking, you can kill me if you really want to. And so he's like, okay, fine. And one of the things she basically says here is, I'm not really responsible for the things that I did. And it's not really said in so many words, but it's basically, I was at a point in my life where I was at a really, really, really low place, right? I was in a really bad spot. And then suddenly a man came along who told me everything that I wanted to hear that made me feel special, that made me feel relevant in a world where I felt painfully irrelevant. And I got carried away with it. But the crazy thing about this is, one thing to understand with Harley Quinn, she wasn't hypnotized. She wasn't tricked. She wasn't mind controlled. She was manipulated to a degree, but at the same time, she also understood the consequences of her actions. She knew that she was doing the wrong thing. We know that she knows she was doing the wrong thing because over the course of her publication history, she recognized the problem she had and actually tried to leave the Joker, but kept going back. But if she understands the problem, but then makes temporary efforts to fix the problem, but then ultimately relapses, then that means she is responsible for her actions because she understands that what she's doing is wrong. And so because of that, the kind of argument of, well, I'm not really responsible for what I did. I mean, I'm sorry that your parents died, but it's not really my fault. At the end of the day, it still is. And she understands that when she goes as far as to say, like, I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of things that I shouldn't have done. And I'm going to pay those consequences for the rest of my life. But I'm just trying to be a better version of myself, right? And, you know, when she sits down and offers a kind of apology to Kevin, you know, that's really all he gets out of her. And in reality, that's all he really can get out of her. And initially, it doesn't seem to be enough. And he actually looks like he intends to go in for the kill, but then essentially doesn't, right? He actually just doesn't really kill Harley Quinn. And so that moment of an apology seems to be enough for him to kind of say, okay, I need to be on my own and rethink things. Now, the reality of this is that if this was in the real world, Harley Quinn would have died. Because if we had a situation where somebody had killed your parents in a violent crime and then in turn showed up to you and said, hey, I'm sorry I killed your parents at some future point in time, that wouldn't be enough, right? I mean, an apology is all you get. That wouldn't be enough, right? I mean, we'd be screaming for blood, right? Eye for an eye, you know? And so he, you know, any normal person would have stabbed her to death. And that's why I think the philosophy of Ghostmaker rings true. It really does ring true here, because where Clown Hunter's like, okay, fine, you know, all right, you know, I kind of get where you're coming from. Again, it's all the exception to the rule, that under any normal circumstance, they would have lashed out and they would have attacked them. And so for the most part, the Batman comics, in terms of how they're being shown here, are very optimistic, which is kind of ironic given how pessimistic the city of Gotham is. And that's one of the reasons why Ghostmaker being involved here makes things so intriguing, because Ghostmaker's stance on this is, I could catch that boy if I wanted to. And then he goes so far as to ask Batman, what were you trying to prove there? By convincing this kid or getting this kid to listen to Harley Quinn and then walk away from the idea of killing her, what do you believe that you've proved here? And the stance of Batman is, it's not about proving anything, right? Like, I just genuinely care about the kid and I didn't want to see him ruin his life. But the other thing that you kind of have to ask here is that if you look at somebody like Ghostmaker and you say, okay, this is a guy who approached the world with the idea that the world can legitimately be saved and killing criminals is a small price to pay for the betterment of the billions of people across the face of the world, then in turn, the question has to be asked, how did he get to that point and how does he maintain that position? Is he really just that obstinate, right? Is he really just that unwilling to listen to reason? Or if he's really as intelligent as Bruce Wayne believes he is, and is really as intelligent as we're being told he is, then he has to have come across different situations over the course of his life that reaffirmed the idea that if villains are given a choice between reforming or staying villains, they'll stay villains, right? Because it's either what they're used to, it's easier, but people will be more likely to commit a crime to achieve a goal than they will be to actually work hard, right? Again, the least effort principle, that people want the greatest reward for the least amount of work that they can do. And so because of that, like, a fight kind of breaks out between the two of them, you know, kind of this final fight that we get. And Batman goes as far as to say, like, do you know how many times I could have killed Harley Quinn over the years, right? How easy it would have been to just eliminate Joker's closest associates, but then nobody learns, nobody changes, nothing's better in the end. Now, the response of Ghostmaker is, not everyone can be saved. And the response of Batman is, but most people can. And you usually cannot tell when you're face to face with them on the worst day of their life. But here's the irony about all that, right? This is why I advocate for the Joker being killed by Batman in comics. Obviously, he'd come back at some point along the line, but it's why I think killing the Joker in Gotham is the only right thing to do, because this assumes that the person you're facing off against is a person of reasonable, rational, sound mind who is otherwise taken into a situation that they normally wouldn't put themselves in, right? Like, a husband loses his job and in order to make ends meet, he robs a bank to buy food to feed his family. That's a very tangible and realistic scenario that we see unfolding even now out there in the world. Now, if Batman were to come across that guy while he's robbing that bank in that moment of desperation, then Batman's statement rings true. Like, you can't see people for how great they can be when you're seeing them in the worst day of their life, right? That moment of desperation. But the thing about the Joker is he's always been crazy. The Joker's not a guy, well, I guess ever since he became the Joker, but the Joker's not a guy where he gets up in the morning, he gets a cup of coffee, he watches the morning news, and he says, okay, time to go be crazy. And then he just goes and does crazy stuff. The Joker's crazy 24 hours a day. He sleeps crazy, right? He eats crazy. You know, he is constantly crazy. He is beyond being helped. Any possible help, any reformation, any fixing him is a pipe dream. This idea of Batman saying like the average person can be fixed, they can be saved, that's true. Because Harley Quinn was not nearly as crazy as the Joker. She wasn't nearly as lost as the Joker was. There was always that portion of her that knew that she was doing the wrong thing. And Batman could tap into that and always try to find a way to bring her back, even if she wasn't readily accepting of it. With the Joker, that's gone. Any semblance of humanity the Joker previously had, any semblance of rationality outside of whatever it is that I can do to get Batman to chase me is the thing that I will do, that's gone. The Joker is really, like, he's not really even human anymore, right? And so because of that, there's no saving him. There's no point where Batman will ever come across a situation and say, okay, now I've quote unquote fixed the Joker. He's back to being a rational person. Everything will be saved. I guess the White Knight might work insofar as like feeding him Joker pills, right? But in terms of organically getting him back to being normal, that's never going to happen. And so as long as the Joker's alive, the Joker will do everything he can to get Batman to chase him. And because of his psychosis, and because of his being a sociopath, he has a complete and total disregard for the thoughts, feelings, emotions, and lives of other people, right? They're irrelevant to him. They're pawns in this game that he plays with Batman. And so the only way to save people from the Joker is to kill the Joker. The fact that Batman's never done that yet really says volumes about Batman's stance on sacrificing innocent people on behalf of keeping the Joker alive, right? It is a reverse version of utilitarianism, but done in a perverse way. And that's something that I want to clear up. That's why I advocate for the Joker being killed. In light of all that, I don't really see how any rational person could advocate for the Joker staying alive and saying Batman shouldn't kill him, right? At this point, it's just the right thing to do. And so it's one of these things where Batman kind of gives up the fight with Ghostmaker, says, look, we've been fighting long enough, right? We've been fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. And in all reality, I've got my place here. You've got your place there, wherever it is that you happen to be. I'm tired of fighting you. I'm tired of doing this. And so in response, like, Batman starts to put his guard back on, and Ghostmaker kind of says, you know, I always kind of wished you'd come charging at me with one of your cars, right? I was always jealous of your cars. I always thought they were cool, you know, and Batman's like, I'm building a new one. And he's like, is it a flying car? It's like, nope, it's just a wheels on the ground car, right? Because remember, Batman's lost pretty much all his wealth, right? He's not really as wealthy as he used to be. All that money has been seized, right? I mean, well, I guess really Lucius Fox is the one that runs Wayne Enterprises, but Bruce Wayne himself is no longer in his company, right? That was one of the big fallout aspects of Joker War. It really is just him and his wits in, you know, using whatever resources he can to do whatever it is that he can. But ultimately, Ghostmaker's like, okay, fine, then I'll be watching you on the Ghostnet, right? I'll be keeping an eye on you in your city because I'm curious to see, are you really going to be able to stem the flow of crime here in Gotham? Or are you going to be like you've always been, a dog chasing his tail, wondering why things aren't getting better? But then Batman stops him and says, you don't actually have to leave here, right? Like, I mean, this truce that we have is there because we really have more respect for each other, and it's more of a rivalry than outright hatred for each other. But at the end of the day, we both respect the other's ability, right? You bring a level of skill to Gotham that nobody else in the Bat family has. And between you and me, we complement each other exceedingly well. So come to Gotham City. Like, come help me save this city, right? If you believe that I could do things better, then show me how to do things better, right? Don't kill anybody in my city, but let's make things better. We can fight crime on a multitude of different levels, right? We can do it in a myriad of different ways. And so initially, the response of Ghostmaker is, man, I don't really know about that. And Batman's like, come on, dude, like, what do you have to lose? And so ultimately, Ghostmaker accepts. Ghostmaker accepts and joins Batman in Gotham City and becomes part of the Bat family. Now, here's the thing. I'm excited about this, right? I'm a little iffy on how it ends because of the fact that, like, we're not going to find out until March, which kind of pisses me off. But I do like the idea of Ghostmaker. I love the character of Ghostmaker. He's amazing. I absolutely adore the character of Ghostmaker. I think it's one of the most interesting additions to the Bat family that's been done in recent years. And when I say recent years, since like Grant Morrison's run, right? Like since Batman Incorporated. I think it's cool. And maybe even before Batman Incorporated. underrated. I think Ghostmaker is probably one of the most interesting characters ever introduced to the Batman mythos. I'm really excited to see where it goes, but the reason why we have to wait until March is because next month we get Future State. So yes, we are getting the Future State event in DC Comics with the future Batwing, the son of Lucius Fox. I'm excited about this, right? I'm excited about the new Batman coming and the new Future State Batman comics. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. And I want to know what you guys think about this story, right? Leave a comment down in the description and or in the comment section rather, and I will catch you all later. Peace. Mm-hmm.